In 1953, well, films I made in 1952 that got celebrated in 1953, you had Singing in the Rain, which is kind of the glitz and glamour, the pizzazz of showing the behind-the-scene mechanics of the evolution transition of Hollywood from silent to sound. And it was a flavor, it's got flavor,
Featuring
musical
Lana Turner.
numbers. And of course, at the same time, you have another film that complete opposite to show behind the mechanics of behind the Hollywood making a movie. Very starch, black and white, very, very dramatic, very foreboding. And this is it. This is the bad and the beautiful.
Yeah, 1952's Babylon. Let's get going.
Pretty much.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
That is true. I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And hey, thank you for supporting the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. Keep the conversation going. Like and subscribe. Hit the buttons. Tell your friends about the show. Of course, we do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals to tell us what movies we should review in the future. And both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out that webpage for critic reviews as well as ours. And today we're going to talk about a 1953 darling of the Oscars in 1953. It won 5 Academy Awards.
Yeah.
It's The Bad and the Beautiful.
So actress Georgia Lorison, director Fred Amiel, and writer James Lee Badalon are invited to work once again with famous producer Jonathan Shields. As each one considers their painful past with Shields, they must reckon with the awful truths of Hollywood and a producer who took advantage.
Okay, Hollywood doesn't mind when you point their lens back at them once in a while unless it's effectively good.
Yeah.
And I think even though this movie kind of hits a lot of raw nerves, it's actually celebrated at the same time. It's interesting to know that Vincent Minnelli, who was directing this movie, at the same time was going through a lot of stuff that the movie was presenting. He was a well-celebrated, regarded director. Mm-hmm. He married a starlet, Judy Garland. They bore a Hollywood princess at the time, a baby in 1946. Liza Minnelli, and this came out in 53. So he's already married, divorced Judy Garland, and then he's already hitting celebrity fame. And then he goes and directs this movie, talking about the kind of the dirtiness of the mechanics of Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they had to get permission from the Academy to use Oscars on a shelf, which I thought was interesting because then the film would go on to win 5. It actually holds a unique record. It has the most awards ever won for a film not nominated for Best Picture.
You never
no
got nominated.
film has won more than 5 awards.
Kind of shows you it did kind of hit a nerve.
Yeah, because Singing in the Rain did pretty good. You know, I think that's true. But at the same time, I do think that Hollywood's biggest thing is they love movies about Hollywood more than they care about the content of those films. And I do think that Hollywood people are jaded, and they watch a movie like this, and they're like, yeah, some people in Hollywood are really bad, but not me. And I do think that's kind of at play here.
So if you want to, Kirk Douglas did, let me step back. Michael Douglas talked in an interview that his dad openly expressed the only reason he did the movie is to present a lot of, in his character playing Jonathan Shields, the people that he disdained in Hollywood and really showed. If you think Jonathan Shields is very much like David O. Selznick, a mixture of Daryl Zanuck, a little bit of Orson Welles, playing girls on each other and the deceitment. I made you, and Daryl, you can see O. Selznick, I made you a star, and I'll treat you like that.
Yeah, it reminded me of, I know this would not have been the hint, but it reminded me of the film Ed Wood, where Ed puts his girlfriend in the pictures, and then he finds someone more tantalizing, and he puts her in the pictures, and he plays the two off each other until he can boil down who's going to really hack it.
Right. And then realize the counterpart, which is Pebble, it's very much like Henry Herman Mankiewicz. Very sturdy, very patient, knows he can do something better. But then you have like Georgina is very much like Diane Barrymore, John Barrymore's daughter. You have Bartlow, who's very much like F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it's very much Zelda. The Laura Graham, who did win an award for this, playing kind of this Zelda character, is very Southern charm. And then you have this person they always talk about, this Van Ellenstein, who is a great director. You see a little bit of his mechanics, but it's kind of a mixture of Alfred Hitchcock and Erich von Stroheim. They kind of together, they accent it very much. So you understand those kind of mechanics, as well as Jonathan Shield and Pebble begin working for, they don't say it, it's RKO.
Oh, yeah.
It's RKO.
Yeah, I mean, they're very much making Cat People before Cat People was made, or after, I guess.
So this is a slow burn for me, but I always wanted to show Cat People to Kyle, then show you this movie.
Well, You know, as somebody who is, I've loved Cat People for years, and every time I rewatch
original
Cat
Cat
People,
People, yeah.
well, and I've the remake, whenever I watch any Cat People movie, I'm like, there should have been more of these, and so now I've been gifted a fourth Cat People movie in this
Technically,
one.
right, yeah.
It just
'Cause the
has a little
costumes
bit
are
of
so
smaller amount.
It's one of my favorite scenes is the costumes are so ugly and they have no expression in their face. You're like,
Well, the whole idea
Yeah.
too is, well, we'll have to find someone slimmer. we can't really take this one out in time. I like that there's like a gentle prodding at things like Cat People with the
Right.
tell don't show because we can't afford to show. And that's even their problem solving technique is, hey, as long as we don't show the cats, we're gonna be fine. It's definitely something that can work in a film like Cat People, but also tends to be overused in a film where we just don't have a good effect.
and also very much Vincent Minnelli is shooting this very melodramatic. It's very that starch, very noir lighting, but also starts with the phone calls. Oh, Jonathan Shields.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
put him
to
on line.
hell.
Go to hell. This very Days of Our Lives soap opera.
Yeah.
And I think it's that, it even talks about they had the Jonathan Shields touch, which is very much lifted from the Lubitz touch that, he did with Shop Around the Corner. And he also had he tried to present it at the end as Lubitz touch at the end, where it's schmaltzy, but not too schmaltzy, but it's still schmaltzy, but we're not going to go too schmaltzy.
Yeah, we can't really decide where on the schmaltzy to hardness kind of a scale that we're going to land on, but we're going somewhere in the middle.
And this movie try to dances between both of the Lubitz touch as well as the starch foreboding.
Yeah,
at
that's
the
true.
same- Yeah.
It's interesting because you wouldn't think a movie from 1952 would have so many references to sex. It's mentioned by name 6 different times in the movie, and you think to yourself like, well, today that's not a big deal, but of course back then, you had to actually talk to the censors about it's a real thing. We can't, you got to schmooze your way through the censors there, and then it's one of those movies that I feel has a harder edge to it than it really does. It's very much a G-ish kind of a film because there really isn't that much to it. But it feels hard-edged. It feels like there's more violence. It feels like there's more swearing, more sex.
Oh
than
yeah,
there
when
actually is in the
Georgina
film.
goes back to hug me at the party, and he's like, "Oh, I can't take it after I get so drained." And then you see, Elaine Stewart up in the. I told her about you. Yeah,
I'll take obvious plot points for 100, Jack.
yes. But it's shot with the perfect, almost like Gone with the Wind, with the
Yeah.
steps are in between. And I don't think there's very much to that set of the house because that's all we see.
Yeah, that's true.
But
And I thought it was funny that actress was, of course, the first one credited in the closing credits.
Elaine Stewart?
It was almost like kind of like a joke and that we're going to reference her first again, kind of show that
Just for
the producer's choice was her.
But it's one interesting. I like the behind the scenes evolutions of things. All of a sudden, Kirk Douglas' character, he's an outsider. His father burned a lot of bridges, and then he's trying to get back in. He actually pays people to go to his father's funeral.
Yeah, I did find out, by the way, $11 back in 1952 would be equivalent to about $225 today. So if you're looking to hire anyone to go to a funeral, call me.
But then he eventually gets through art, the kind of the arc. Walter Pidgeon playing the character. We know Walter Pidgeon from Forbidden Planet, but he gets involved with the mechanics, and you see how he's able to develop stars, get trusted with script, but also he undercuts his friends. You see it very much. He's shaking your hand, but he's undercutting your deal.
Yeah.
I'd rather hurt you now than kill you later, pal. Take it as a compliment.
Yeah, and don't worry, it'll get better. It's
Yeah.
kind of like I'll get you on the next one kind of a feeling. I think it feels it's an anthology in a lot of ways.
It kinda is, yeah.
Because the stories are of course intertwined, but there are 3 separate characters with 3 separate interpretations of the same guy, and those interpretations do have some bleed through. But they each had different parts of his career that they focused on too. And as we see, people change throughout their careers. So it's a hodgepodge where you feel like if one of these stories doesn't work as well as the other one, you might be taken out of the story. It has that kind of anthological kind of flavor to it, which could hurt the film or could help the film.
It's an interesting point because Jonathan Shields' character did launch their careers, no matter how harsh.
Yes.
He did get them started.
Yeah, it's kind of
And
like I
then-
brought you into this world, I can take you out, and will.
But they obviously did some other things on their own merit.
Yeah.
But then it looks like their careers at the beginning of the movie have dwindled, and he's trying to get a one last start, but he's scourged them so harshly, they're not going to be entertained the idea, no matter how much the sales pitch Walter Pidgeon's going to give them. And forget, Walter Pidgeon used to be a salesman before he was a movie actor. Mm-hmm. So
Well, I was thinking about that, and kind of the film has this weird. I don't want to call it nature versus nurture, but it was like a career nature versus career nurture. Can you always get ahead in your career because of your abilities, or is it always going to be who you know that gets you in? You know,
Yes.
there's that question that's at play a lot throughout the film, and I don't think it gives us a specific answer.
There's no
but
clarity to
asks
it, right?
us to question that.
You're right. I don't think there's no clarity
Yeah.
to the point. But understand that, hey, I knew I was going to be a good writer, good director, and you scorched me, and I was able to do it. But right, without
And is the scorching what prompted me to be better? You know, is our pain and the things that we fail at prompt us to do better, or do they tend to sink us? Or would we always have been great? It's that kind of interplay, because as we see with Lana Turner's character, is that she's even told by several people, "You're terrible. Like, you're not.
Yeah.
She's not going to be good in this." Did she get better of her own accord, or did she get better because she had someone believing in her?
And I'm great to point it out. That is tough to look like, and that's Lana Turner trying to be a bad actress,
Yeah.
acting like a bad actress, but then you really do behind the scenes performance, and I don't think she gets a lot of credit for it. It's tough to do both.
Well, you can't give credit for bad performances, even
Right.
if it's good
But that's-
performance. It's supposed to be bad.
But the way she tells him off in his bed, get out. Yeah. And you understand, she had a scorchy past, too. Lana Turner. She had a rough kind of scorchy past.
Cast for a reason, maybe.
And you get all your, of course, you get your Kirk Douglas outlandish thing, the stuff he did in Out of the Past is very out there, very loud character.
I'm still shocked when I see Kirk Douglas in 1952. Like, just as a time, like Kirk Douglas was acting in 19. It's a shock to me because he was just alive a few years ago. You know, you almost think to yourself, did Kirk Douglas have a
And all
dad
these-
that was
yeah.
working? You know?
Been a long time, been gone a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, up next is kind of our review of a movie that's only 70 years old.
Yeah, only 70.
So, I've seen this about 4 times. This is kind of your first time. This is the first time I've ever seen it. I like to go to you first because this is your first reaction to it. Overall, what do you think of The Bad and the Beautiful?
So I'm going to only mention first and foremost the thing I didn't like, and then I'm going to talk about all the things I do. The thing I don't like about this movie, and if you haven't seen it, this might be a good time to pause and go check it out. I did not care for the ending. I did not find that the ending felt climactic, with all of the characters walking out of that office and they're never going to turn back, and then they pick up the phone and they get one over in that few seconds. I didn't think there was enough there. I thought it was an interesting idea, but not executed as well as I would have liked. That these 3 people would have walked out on this opportunity multiple times only to be swayed in the final seconds. I didn't buy that, especially considering the third character being a guy who literally lost his wife in a plane crash. Like, that he would just somehow forgive the producer for lying to him about that. I just didn't buy that at all. Everything else in the film, I quite liked.
It's a dynamic piece, right? And then at the end it goes,
Yeah, I just
With
didn't
all
think
this-
there was enough meat at the climax. That's about it.
right. I have to give you that. It's almost he's trying to do that Lubitsch touch at the end.
Exactly, but I think that the pendulum doesn't swing back enough because we've gone, especially with that third story being as dark as it is. We don't get the darkness until the end of the story, but that whole, as we get Victor Gaucho Ribera and running off with this guy's wife, and then the plane crash, and then he's broken man and he's completely destroyed, and then he finds out that the guy he's supposed to trust is doing it. Like, there's so much drama in that scene. I just don't know if the pendulum swings back fast enough.
I do like the beginning. It's interesting with the phone calls, but you get all of their who they are to begin with. You even get the shot of Harry Pebble with the crane, the very famous crane, and it's very much Hollywood. It's camera on camera, showing an operating camera, and it's very Hollywood. She's laying there just,
The scene that's being shot reminded me of, like, the body double vampire scene. Just because it does seem like they're kind of doing the
like
exact same
Brian
crane
De Palma
move,
doing something, and,
Yeah.
and then phone call here shoots, and it's like, get out of here. And then you have the starlet. I told you I didn't hear you. Hang up the phone. But right, everything is kind of a punch. It goes back and forth. I think editing should have been nominated, but you're not going to get. It didn't really get. But costuming is surprisingly well. This got nominated for costuming and won. Singing in the Rain did not.
Yeah, that's interesting because I would feel, and I've never done any research, so don't quote me on this, but I would feel that color films would tend to win some of the design quality things, the costume awards, the makeup things, the production design. Like, I would tend to believe that would go towards color films. Except for those rare situations where there was like 2 awards, because there was a best cinematography black and white that this film won, and there was a best cinematography color that same year. So, like, I can understand that,
Yeah, and then it won Best Art Direction, Supporting Actress Gloria Graham, which is funny because she won this award, and then she's not the most. That's not the most famous thing. When you say Gloria Graham, I'm thinking all the noir she did, including like The Big Heat and all that. And she's only here for a couple moments.
Yeah, she has less than 10 minutes of screen time, which puts her in that group of lowest amount of screen time for awards win.
Yeah, we talked about it on Network.
Yeah, Network. Did Ruby Dee win for American Gangster? I can't remember, but she was up for like 5 minutes of screen time in a 3-hour movie. So, it's interesting that we get recognized for the things almost that we don't expect to.
Right.
You know?
And it's an interesting title. It's so melody. It's like you expect a soap opera. It sells it almost like a soap opera, but there's like a deep thing.
Yeah, the poster has got that too, where like Kirk Douglas is like leaning over the girl, and it's like it definitely looks like one of those like
it's
screaming on the outside. You know,
I think it's more clickbait than now. Because it's selling you the movie that you think you want to see, and that's not the movie. I think it's very clickbait, because you have to do that for the movies all the time. There's cradling the woman. No,
everything is emotionally broken, and so am I.
Yes.
Thankfully, though, the film, when I mentioned that pendulum not swinging back from the hard to the soft at the end. I do think that when it starts off with you get those 3 phone calls, it's very much that kind of like fast talking high trousers kind of like comedic thing with the phone,
kind of like
play.
A newsreely kind of.
Yeah, and then this pendulum does swing nicely into the hard edge from there when they go to visit, Pebble. That works really well. That pendulum swing from the soft to the hard there, and maybe that's why you can forgive the poster for being very clickbaity and the title for being that way, is because within 5 minutes you know what the plot of the movie is.
Right, and I think they changed the title, if I remember, to something that was even worse, like The Influencer or something like that, or something like it was really horrible. And I think they thought they came up with this title that I think sells a little bit better.
It's an improvement.
Right. Yeah.
Is it good? I don't know, but in the grand scheme of things, I guess the titles matter after decades of viewing. So,
but I think it's very interesting at the time, 1953. There is a transition, like Singing in the Rain did it, a transition of the mechanics of the producer in charge, and now we're going to the director in charge. And I think that is played a little bit because remember, he's like, I want to see Walter Pigeon. I want to see black ink on the books and a kiss at the end. That's all I want. I don't want awards.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's very much the producer's gone, and then now it's the director. And eventually, after the director from the 50s, it goes into New Hollywood.
When I think that they started to find as the Academy Awards went on, and because that was, and still is, the premier award to win for your film, we started to see things like the more power given to a director tended to lead to winning more because the director had a vision. They were focused on more than just the income level. So I think that's where we started to see that kind of interplay shift in the 50s was like, well, we want to win these awards because they stand the test of time then. People remember the awards more than they remember the box office.
I do like that one thing at the end is where, of course, it's in the studio building lot, and they shoot one scene of a movie that's very much a genre, but behind is the royal court checkered platform, which is only 2 feet away from you. But of course, just like Hollywood Magic, it's 2 different movies.
Yeah.
But it's only 2 spaces 2 feet apart from each other.
Yeah.
Different aesthetics, and that's wonderful encapsulation of what Hollywood is. It's all magic.
Yeah.
Even though it's just the same proximity.
Well, I made the comparison to Babylon here in the opening, but I do think that the films kind of have this intercommingling marriage to them, even though one, of course, is set a couple of decades, early. But there is kind of a relation between the two. I just think this one was done much better. But there is that sense that was one of my favorite parts of Babylon was the multiple films shooting like 10 feet away from each other, where you'd leave one set and enter another, and you're just in another movie all of a sudden. And that's really where we get that Blazing Saddles joke of knocking down the wall, and all of a sudden you're in a different movie.
You're in the MGM lot, and then you're in the cafeteria. Yeah. So it's nice that we like the movies that kind of pull back the curtain to show kind of the mechanics of what's going on, with all warts and all sometimes.
Yeah, that's fair. And as it comes to the 3 stories, I think my favorite was the third story because it had an emotional wrench to it.
Yeah.
And because I didn't expect it to go where it went. I think that the multiple twists and turns to the tale, they feel expected if you describe them. Like if you told me what's going to happen, I'd be like, well, yeah, obviously, right? But then watching it, the way in which Minnelli's able to direct that sequence does feel surprising.
Who's been playing he's been playing Philip Marlowe, the hard-nosed detective, and here he's kind of the soft guy, trying to navigate all his moves.
Yeah, and I think the first story was another one where it's like I enjoyed the story. I thought it was really well put together and surprising, but also expected. My least favorite one was actually
Georgina's,
because I think part of it was that I think the film just spends a little too much time with her and her story, because her story is very classic Hollywood tale of, I've used up this female starlet, and now I'm going to toss her aside for the next one. And we've seen that story, and even, I think even in the 50s we'd seen that story.
And it gets played out again in The Godfather.
Yeah. And so I think we spend a lot of time on that specific section. I don't think it's the most engaging. But again, these are just kind of nitpicks I have with an overall really well-crafted movie.
Scorsese says it's one of the top 10 films of the 1950s. Put a comment below to see if you agree with him.
Yeah. Give us your top 10 of the 50s. No, you don't have to. You can just tell us your favorite movies from the 50s.
Yeah, keep the conversation going.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
And make sure that while you're down there, you like and subscribe. They're 2 free things that help to support the channel immensely, and you never miss new episodes of the show as they drop. You can also find all my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
You can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts. And I'm beautiful. Guess what he is?
Beautiful.
The best.